so I'll call the meeting to order at 7:02. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Allred,
Here?
Mr. Andreessen,
Here.
Mr. Fell, Mr. Hopkins, Ms. McFarland, Ms. Sims,
Here.
and Ms. Yu.
Here.
All right, so it looks like we have a quorum. Are there any changes to the agenda?
There are none.
All right, so approval of minutes. We have minutes from 3 meetings, the February 23rd, March 9th, and April 6th meeting. Are there any motions or comments on the minutes from the last 3 meetings?
I move that we send the minute from February 23rd, March 9th, and April 6th to for approval.
So we have a motion from Ms. Yu. Any seconds?
Second.
Second from Ms. Sims. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. Do we have any communications?
We do not.
And we have a couple of continued public hearings. So plan case number 2468T23, an application by the Urbana zoning administrator to amend the Urbana zoning ordinance to allow more than one residential building on any lot zoned for multifamily use. This case has been continued to the next regular meeting. And plan case number 2469SU23, an application by 1919 Architects on behalf of the Housing Authority of Champaign County for a special use permit to allow renovation of Steer Place Apartments at 1202 East Harding Drive, a property in the Southeast Urbana Overlay District. This case has been continued to the May 18th, 2023 regular meeting of the Plan Commission.
And if I could just jump in and add some background on that. So the reason that case was continued is the Housing Authority was waiting to see if they got funding from the Illinois Housing Development Authority, and it sounds like that funding has come through, so that case will certainly be going on the 18th of May.
Okay, sounds good. So we have no new public hearings, no new business. Public input. We have no public input, or no one from the public, it looks like. Do we have a staff report? Or is this going to be the study session?
Yeah, we don't have a staff report.
Okay, so we should have a motion to go into a study session, is that
That's correct.
correct? Okay. So would anyone like to make a motion so we can go into a study session? All right, do we have a second?
Second.
Can you do a voice vote for that, or we just do it? Or,
We can do a voice vote.
all right. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, so we are in our study session then.
Good evening, everybody.
Welcome.
Just thanks for having us this evening, and this is something we've been looking forward to get your input on Examine Urbana, something that Lily has worked extensively on with a lot of members of our staff, and it's going to be a useful tool as we go into our next round of community engagement as background information. And hopefully you've all had a chance to look at it, but Lily's going to go through each chapter, go through some highlights, and we look forward to your feedback.
Thank you. Yeah, and so Examine Urbana is kind of like the background information for the comprehensive plan. What we are trying to do here, or doing things a little bit differently, is kind of lead with the trends and issues that you'd usually see when you develop a comprehensive plan. You'd have this background information component, and it usually takes up a lot of the space. And then in the back, of of a chapter, you'd see, a mention of some things that you should really think about for the upcoming comprehensive plan, things that it could be issues. And we tried to make this a reasonably sized website as best we could, and kind of make sure that we led with and put front and center the people of Urbana, data from Urbana that explains Urbana a little bit better than, say, federal data. That definitely is included in here, but we tried to minimize it as much as possible. And then also kind of make sure that we were explaining those trends and issues as thoroughly as we could in this brief website. So I'm just going to go over a little bit of how to use it and how it's structured. If you go to examine.urbanaillinois.us, which is also the city's website, urbanaillinois.us, if you replace the www part with examine, you can get to this background information site. You also, if you go to Imagine Urbana, you can find it, or if you go to the city's comprehensive plan website, you can find it there as well. So Examine Urbana are these 8 chapters. Now we have 7 chapters that are done. We had to postpone the health and safety chapter because there's a lot going on across the city right now for health and safety. We want to make sure that that process is fleshed out and it's captured, and that way we can then report on that as it relates to the comprehensive plan and background information later after that's wrapped up across different city departments and city council. I think yes. Yes. I just, right. I
Oh,
think
it's
the
on one of them?
projector is just
Okay,
not on.
perfect. As long as you guys see it good.
Cool, yeah.
Kim can't see it, probably.
So the Examine Urbana, hopefully you start by clicking on the first chapter. You're not one of those folks who goes to the last one. You can, but you'll miss out on some of the instructions. Examine Urbana, we do go through what the purpose is, kind of also what Examine Urbana is not. Every once in a while we'll have someone seeing all these kinds of comprehensive planning issues and wonder, oh, is this the comprehensive plan? It is not. It is meant to not be comprehensive on these issues and on the subjects that are in here. I think it's really, if you're an expert on the arts and culture in Urbana, arts and culture program, and how the city's interaction in that, you probably will be saying, hey, I wish there was like just a little bit more on murals or poets on glass. And in that case, this is really for everybody to kind of get a broad understanding of these programs. And in being respectful of their time, it's really kind of for your neighbor. So if you're wondering why there's not more on geothermal in Urbana, we have an extensive geothermal program. It's really for that neighbor who doesn't know about all the things that we do for energy and working with the environment in Urbana. The most important tip that we can give the public and for you all to spread amongst the people that you know of Urbana is to please let the page load. When you load up a page, if you can just keep that, stay on that title slide until the page is loaded, until the picture is less blurry, that really helps you kind of scroll through on phones or on computers. If you ever get to a place where you're looking at this video and say it freezes, hitting this refresh button after you've waited for a little bit, that's really helpful. The first couple times you visit the website, your computer is going to have to collect a couple of and download some of these images and videos. And so that process can be a little bit difficult the first couple times for some people, depending on their internet speed. We talk about what is the Urbana Comprehensive Plan, what is comprehensive plans. We go over a brief overview of Urbana in this introduction chapter, just some of the high-level trends. And then, we really try to lead you straight into kind of the background information that we're trying to do. At any point, you can always click those 4 squares in the corner there, and you can get to the navigation page. There's also a lot of times where these subjects will overlap with each other. And so there's plenty of times where you could be reading development and taxes and see a link to housing if you wanted to know more. Or we also try to do, since this part of this was kind of it's free to put in hyperlinks. We put in a lot of resources in case you read something and you want to know a lot more about it. We have a lot of resources linked to different sites across this web and on a variety of subjects. I think there's even a couple of links to Urbana Free Library books. So,
One of the things, I think Lily coined this phrase, that it's really to educate, empower, and encourage people to go to get involved in the next round of community engagement. And so very good background information. I think if people read it, they'll have a better understanding in order to participate in that next round.
so from that, I'm just going to quickly cycle through some of the chapters. You have development and taxes next, which, we start with development and taxes, and then you can see that you have sections on history, the regulations. We regulate development, we incentivize development, and it has a really important and unique and also sometimes misunderstood relationship with taxes and how schools are paid for, how sidewalks are done, how roads are done, future considerations. Those future consideration sections are really times where, while we might have touched upon certain topics throughout the chapter, we're going to bring it back to a couple of things for you to keep in mind for that upcoming engagement, but also the future comprehensive plan. And if you're reading like a draft comprehensive plan, you can kind of see, oh, did we really address this, or is this something that we addressed in a way that I'm interested in?
One thing we didn't mention, this chapter will be covered at the council meeting next Monday night. At each week's meeting, we're going through one of the chapters very briefly, just to kind of call out some highlights of that. And different members of the staff are helping with that. So this next chapter will be, development and taxes will be on Monday night.
This chapter, transportation, was actually covered this week at City Council, and it's interesting because a lot of the questions that were had about it actually pertain to the development and taxes chapter, so hopefully those two will be, if you read them together, it should make a lot of sense. But we go over, transportation, how it's connected. We have a street grid, we have infrastructure that is tied into everybody else's systems. We don't have, pearly gates or something at Wright Street. All of it means that we do a lot of coordination with a lot of different agencies. We talk a lot about that. We talk about people of Urbana and some of the things that they're doing. We talk about how we plan asset management, funding concerns. Right now we have some pretty concerning trends that the comprehensive plan will have to wrestle with. You'll hear a lot about that come budget season, which is almost upon us. But we have some issues in Urbana about having enough money to actually pay for the infrastructure that we currently own. And that is a large concern if we keep not doing anything to address that. Where will we be in 10, 20 years in the time span of a comprehensive plan? We have some projects, some recent ones that you can kind of see where, what we're doing. This is actually an event every year that 4 agencies, the City of Urbana being one of them, buys bicycle lights and distributes them as the days are getting shorter in the fall. Like, for instance, MCOR, Lincoln and Springfield, I think, is another one, Florida Avenue. And then we have questions again at the end of the chapter. That leads us to arts and culture. Arts and culture is probably one of the most visually striking chapters. We did try to intermingle this as much as we could with data. We had to pull from the 2019 year because that was the most finalized year in final reports for festivals and art that was installed and done in Urbana. We also talk a lot about the COVID-19 impact and how everything in arts and culture, as far as what the City of Urbana reaches, changed overnight. And it changed not in a way that it got smaller, it actually almost expanded, which was a really unique and interesting part of COVID-19 for the residents of Urbana, but also just the residents of the region, with also future considerations. This one was actually done a lot with our former arts and culture coordinator, Dr. Rachel Storm. We now have a new one, new arts and culture specialist, and where it's exciting to see how that coordinator works with the community and how that program grows and evolves. And then we go to housing. Housing talks probably the most about development history, but really focusing in on the history of Urbana, a little bit about, just gonna slide through this a little bit, how Urbana has grown and developed from the 1800s, 1900s, and then we talk a lot about the racial segregation that has really makes a lot more sense out of our development patterns from 1940s and so on. And really kind of before that, but Urbana actually grew in huge spurts after World War II. So we talk a lot about that. We talk about some of the effects of that in today's Urbana. We talk a lot about how almost every department at the City of Urbana works on housing and works on housing in different ways. So that's a really interesting portion. But of course, the star of the show would be our grants management and community development services. They do probably a lot of just day in, day out housing. And then the social services that also kind of are important to bolster housing, particularly in areas that are identified as low income. That would be our community development target area, which is what grants uses to prioritize their federal funds, their community development block grant funds. And that's a lot of the city's housing funds as well. And then we have a couple of questions. After we talk about housing trends, we talk about possible solutions, things to think about, also because those possible solutions are entertaining, like how things are working with dealing with the marketplace of housing. Then we get to energy environment. This is probably one of our shortest chapters because it was one of the first chapters to be done. We had a very enthusiastic group help us out with developing it. So we talk about, warmer, wetter Urbana, future trends, kind of what City of Urbana's role is in this, energy in city and how the city addresses energy consumption and CO2, carbon dioxide equivalent, gas emissions, a little bit about the Urbana Climate Action Plan, cooling the city, talking a lot about what we can see, for instance, with neighborhood coverage of trees and street tree vacancies. And then also, I think this is probably because it was the first one, has the most fleshed out future consideration questions. They're really near and dear to my heart, so.
The Sustainability Commission was very forthcoming with comments, and Lily was able to incorporate their comments as well. Similar to the Arts and Culture Commission, and then Community Development Commission also reviewed their parts as well.
And then the last chapter, kind of bookend from what is a comprehensive plan. It's about the current comprehensive plan, the 2005 plan. We go through kind of some of the findings. If you want to read a much more in-depth report, there's actually one on the comprehensive plan page on the city and also on imagineurbana.com. But we went through kind of what the current comprehensive plan is and what it did really well. And then the lessons learned is kind of what we want to do a little bit better. And we'll go through each one of those. We had 5 recommendations come out of that assessment. The most one of them would be the city's comprehensive plan will focus on community-wide issues instead of focusing in on a select few neighborhoods. And a lot of those goals and objectives that were a part of those select few neighborhoods didn't actually get accomplished because it was a strange place to put those kinds of neighborhood-specific things without having a neighborhood-specific and more holistic planning process to go along with it. And that also then left out all the other neighborhoods and neighborhood needs and priorities.
Can you give an example of that? That seems to be intriguing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think we go into the data, a lot of data behind that, that kind of pulls into that in the actual report. So, for instance, you can see this map. It's a little bit small on this tablet-sized screen, but you have neighborhoods of Urbana that are in a darker blue. That light blue on your screen, for instance, is all like kind of non-residential areas of Urbana. And then the specific neighborhoods that were mentioned in the plan are the dark green, and then the sole neighborhood that was selected to be a partner in implementation is actually that light green, which is this historic East Urbana neighborhood right behind us that we're in. And the most interesting thing about that was, of those things, they were really parts of the comprehensive plan that said we were going to do specific We're either going to do, identify certain issues that were really broad just for this one area, or we were going to do an overlay, or we were going to do transit-oriented development, or we were going to do X, Y, and Z. And a lot of those specific measures were not the things we were successful at. What we were successful at actually were a whole lot of things that we were able to address in neighborhoods that were not mentioned at all in the 2005 comprehensive plan, but they actually met certain needs and reactive needs that we saw in the community, and staff was able to prioritize that as a housing measure or as an economic development priority that correlates to the comprehensive plan instead.
I think I got what you mean. So in the 2005 planning process, there were a lot of recommendations coming from certain neighborhood wants to do big things, but actually it didn't get implemented, as well as some of those more needs-driven project that was more accomplished.
Really, actually, one or two neighborhoods had big things, and instead, a lot of other neighborhoods, there's 13 other neighborhoods that had a lot of those other kinds of things, but they were more tied to more specific and concrete and more actionable goals and objectives in the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
Lily, you might address, kind of expand on that, in that those parts of the plan that were more specific and did have more specific goals were those that were more successful as well.
They were not.
Or
Yeah, the vice versa.
yes.
So those really much more specific parts. Some of the things that we did really well, if you look at our equity section, which we called social services, and we call social services in our current comprehensive plan, we knocked that out of the park. That was great. Of our active transportation portions of it, which were very minimal and very broad in the 2005 comprehensive plan, I would say we really knocked that out of the park as well. There's been 2 bicycle master plans since. There's been a pedestrian master plan. There's even a bicycle wayfinding plan, which, of that too, we're a gold level bicycle community, which we were not in 2005, as designated by the League of American Bicyclists. And I probably could list off a lot of other accomplishments in active transportation for Urbana in that time period, but that was something that was almost it was a vision, and it was tied to a vision for Urbana in the current comprehensive plan, and that was enough for staff to really go forward with that vision and figure out what the best actions were, whereas the really specific things were much more reactionary to, at the passage of the 2005 plan. We had a couple of stakeholders from a couple of neighborhoods, 1 or 2, and they had these their more pet projects put inside a community-wide plan, and that's not where staff can easily find the really specific stuff. Meanwhile, that kind of leaves other neighborhoods, without having those really specific projects mentioned in the plan.
Can you give an example of those pet project?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a good example would be in 1998, before the comprehensive plan, we had a Historic Preservation Commission formed. That Historic Preservation Commission worked with city staff and worked with city council on a variety of preservation cases and districts, and writing a chapter of the ordinance with several revisions in the zoning ordinance. I think in the 2005 comprehensive plan, there were a couple of mentions of historic preservation of specific things. I don't think, off the top of my head, it has been since 2021 since we wrote that report for the 2005 comprehensive plan assessment. But those specific items of historic preservation we did not do. And I can always send out a link to you if you'd like of the 2005 assessment.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
just seems to be, as we're going into the new plan, that kind of information is really, really important for us to know what worked well and what did not.
Yeah, that's why that was the first thing that I think we did, was create this assessment document, is to kind of see what we did well. One thing that, well, I'll get to it. city's new comprehensive plan will be a little bit more holistic. So again, this is a thing where of the city departments that were involved in implementing the plan, 65% of it was falling onto community development services. Makes a lot of sense when you think about how, you know, these things get approved. About 25% of it was public works, but that left police, fire, finance, executive, you know, kind of clumped into that last 6 or 7%, which is fine, but it makes it really hard for being a citywide vision. I think there was only one implementation action out of 191 actions for the fire department, and there was absolutely 0 for the police department. And that's not how the police and fire actually see their role in public safety today. Of those 32 outside agencies that were involved in the plan, you know, most of them were government agencies. Business groups were about a quarter of that. Nonprofits were 15. And I think when we think about this, neighborhood associations 7, other is 7. I think when we think about this, there'd be a bigger even distribution in working with different parts of the community. And I think that pulls into, you can see at the bottom of here, you can see the effectiveness of implementation strategies. There's actually each and every one of them we evaluated, and it's in the first appendix. The new comprehensive plan will be evaluated every 2 years and be updated more regularly. This was something that at 2005, we did one update in 2006, and then after that, it slowly became more and more of you know, something that, you know, planners used more regularly, and more people were growing farther and farther away from the comprehensive plan. And that just made it very difficult for a lot of folks across the city to feel like there was like a unified strategy or a vision forward. And also 2005 was a different time, as you can see here. There was a different president, a different governor. Everybody was friends with Tom from MySpace. Dee Brown was a really important figure in Urbana. There was flip phones. We were on the 4th Harry Potter movie. Yep. So we also, too, we put, you know, equity and sustainability, and we put them in really specific small roles. And this is not the effect, I mean, this, you can see they're broken up by how effective they were: complete, established, ongoing, partially complete, not complete, and totally changed, of these different implementation strategies. But you can see services and infrastructure, that was kind of where a lot of our equity measures, you know, kind of went in the 2005 comprehensive plan. And there's small little bar graphs, and there's small little bar graphs because there wasn't a whole lot there, and you know, we had mixed results on what was listed. So it's important to not only keep this up to date and revisit every once in a while, but also equity is a really important part of Urbana. It's seen that way from our staff, from City Council, from I would think Plan Commission, from our residents, and we heard a lot of that in 2021 in our public input. So this next comprehensive plan, we want to make sure that equity and sustainability are part of every part of the plan. We talk a little bit about that. There's more in the document. And then making sure that the comprehensive plan is easy to read and accessible. And we're talking about accessibility in a variety of different ways, but making sure that it's just written in a way that doesn't mean that you have to know what transit-oriented development really means, and that statement alone means a whole lot to you. It's written in a way that says, you know, that talking in a way that I would talk to, or any of us would talk to, a friend or a neighbor or a stranger who you just want to get information or tell information to. Yeah, and then that is Examine Urbana.
And we've talked a little bit about how we want to use this as background for the next round of community engagement, but it really is a wonderful resource for staff. I mean, there's so much information here that if you have questions from the public, you can refer them to a specific chapter so that they can learn more about it. And then just internally, you know, our staff can learn as well. So it's not just for this outward community engagement exercise, but you know, we see this as a resource for us for years to come. I mean, it's not going to get outdated too quickly, but the history's there, and it's really important.
Great, thank you. Yeah, this is an amazing resource that you've created. Thank you so much for all your hard work on this, and thanks for the presentation tonight. Are there any questions or comments for staff?
And if I could just add something, Lily has spent a lot of time, yes, staff has assisted along the way, but she's really the mastermind behind this, and she's also used it as her capstone project for her urban and regional planning degree, which she will be getting next month. So, thanks, guys. She turns red on that, but yeah, but it's a huge achievement.
Yeah.
It's really something.
Well deserved. Nishu?
No, I'm just reflecting on lesson learned session. Now I remember you did presented that before, but most of the time that kind of information takes me at least 2 passes to register in my head.
You're not alone.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. I'm glad you say that, and I hope you remind staff regularly, because I think when you are looking at it every day for 3 or 4 months, you kind of forget that.
And I just have a small comment. Like, I looked at it before, and looking at it again, I think the vision of making sure that it's accessible and linguistically competent and visually appealing is there. And so, that intention really makes a difference, where I'm not overwhelmed by the language or shut out or disconnected. And so I think some of the goals and objectives, I will say, the last thing is, I think the website is far more diverse than my experience. So just as an FYI, maybe that's like a future, imagine, but but it is very appealing.
Anyone else? It's going to be, where's this going to live long term? Like, is it publicly accessible now, or?
Yeah, it definitely is. Yeah, so there is that short URL. It is the city's website, and then you just replace the www with examine.urbanaillinois.us. Oops. And there is kind of a nice, it's a double-edged sword, but there's a kind of a nice home for it online. The city of Urbana owns a server that rests with the county, and we pay the county annually to maintain that server for us. And that helps us with a lot of internal projects. I think this is maybe the first external project to go on this server for public facing. Possibly the GIS portal, the brand new GIS portal, is also public on that server. But that means that we have a lot of control over the software version of StoryMap, Esri StoryMap software. When it gets updated, we would be ones that would be making the update, and we'd be able to easily, pull back that update if it broke something. So that's fantastic. The double edge to that is that means that we're also in charge of making sure that software stays updated, and making sure that that is something that also could possibly break it in itself. But that means that this is something that Esri. This is a StoryMap Esri product. They've been doing it for many years. It's changed drastically over the past couple of years, but I don't think I've seen anything online that there's past ones that were made 5 or 6 years ago that are broken today. So there's some kind of version control out there in Southern California, and they're thinking about it a little bit. But that's, of course, a bit of concern. Luckily, it should be up for several years without problem.
Awesome. Can you navigate to it from the city's website, or do you have to type in the address?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you ever went to the city's website and you got to the comprehensive plan page, where there's the 2005 assessment, where there's the 2021 community engagement summary, where the 2005 comprehensive plan lives to, there's a link right there. There's a link on imagineurbana.com. So if you get a newsletter, or you remembered that from 2020, 2021, and you're like, wow, let me go to Imagine Urbana. I think also too, the Google search results probably, prefer it'll list that higher at the top. Then you'll also see a project page just dedicated to Examine Urbana, and you'll be able to go there from there.
So there's 3 places you can find it.
I would say that if summer is coming, you probably are going to talk to people about this, getting public input, get a nice brochure or a stand with a QR code where people can scan would be a good way to go.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. And you bring up a really good point. I mean, we want people to see this. We want people to read it. So tell your friends and neighbors if, if they can direct them to that site. We really want people to, it's such helpful information. Anybody, it doesn't matter how long you've lived in Urbana, you will find something that you didn't know about your city. It's really amazing. Every time, I mean, I've read through it, we've edited it, but still I'll pick up something else. It's really valuable information for us.
We actually had a transportation reviewer, someone who's really involved in transportation, and outside voice review it early on, and they wanted things to be added here and there, of course, right? And they understood that it was too long as it was, but they told us a story about their neighbor and their neighbor coming out and seeing residential speeding, which is a common thing that we heard in 2021. Residential speeding is a concern. And then the neighbor said something along the lines of, this treatment to the road maybe would help. And it was counterintuitive. It was something that anybody who's looked at transportation would be like, oh, that'd make it a lot worse. And so once they said that, it kind of clicked that this isn't meant to be something where, someone who doesn't know a ton about transportation could maybe get a little bit more information about that, and then kind of address their concerns and their questions. Well, why isn't the city doing this? Or what are the different things that interact with that? We're hoping for the next part of the engagement, you kind of become the decision maker. But in order to become a decision maker, I don't know how you all are, I want to know more about it before I comment, before I answer the question.
Can you go back to that story and then tell me again why it doesn't click for me, how that residents' comment has informed us the way we are doing things? It has not yet clicked. Can you say it again?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So the expert was wondering why we weren't going into a lot more depth on a couple of different moments. And then when they, we were talking off onto a tangent about their neighbor, they mentioned their neighbor saying that they were concerned about residential speeding, and then they thought maybe the city should increase the width of the road. And the transportation person who's talking to their neighbor said, oh, no, wait, that's really, that probably would have really bad impacts on transportation safety and residential speeding. And then they realized, oh, this is who the transportation chapter is for. It's for folks who aren't as involved as I am, and they're starting from a more I wonder why we're doing this, and how are we doing it, and what are the kind of issues at play.
I see. Thanks.
Thank you.
Has this been shared with community groups or different organizations in the
It's been shared with media.
neighborhoods?
Yeah, and
media?
we've sent it out to groups as well. We sent it out to the neighborhood groups to read. Anyone that we met in that first round of community engagement, those types of groups, we've sent it out to them as well.
And everybody who signed up for a newsletter in 2021, and afterwards, we got it out there.
So all newsletter subscribers, newsletters meaning the Imagine Urbana newsletter when you went up on that site. So we've sent it to, put it in that as well. So trying to get the word out. Any other ideas you have, we're certainly receptive to anything. Share on social media, et cetera.
I think that's part of the rationale of going to council every week, too.
Yeah,
as
I
well.
think Chenchi's idea, make a poster with a QR code and put it up at the library or stick it around.
I like that idea a lot.
some Churches, I don't know, just get it out into the community different
Yeah.
ways. I think I got the email newsletter because I must have signed up at some point. But yeah, I mean, getting it out to the people who provided input in the earlier rounds of the visioning process.
And we actually got a couple of comments from that, thanking us for sending it, okay, the process is still going on. They know we're still working on things. And
So I definitely have the newsletter, but it did not pop enough for me to really go in and see it. So when you have a good website like this, sending several newsletters, highlighting a section at a time would be a good way to go because you want repeat exposure.
Similar to what we're doing with council, highlighting something every week. And your point is well made about nobody grasp it in the first go around, that you have to keep, reminding people, and we're all like that. I mean,
Having a deadline,
Yeah, absolutely.
look at it by whatever, just will encourage more follow-through because everybody's sort of triaging everything.
Yeah.
And so
That's
if
a
you
good point.
tell me, like, there's a sense of emergency. That'll help it be prioritized in a world where we're flooded with.
We'll have to start, I think librarians do that for summer reading programs. We'll have to start like an adult reading program.
Even
for,
if it
like,
seems
you need to
completely
stamp each
arbitrary, right?
chapter.
You can just make it up, right?
And we will be publishing dates of this next round of community engagement. Some of them will be online, some will be in person. So I think to use your approach as, okay, these are the dates, please read such and such by that time. I like that.
Any more of a teaser on what's coming next with?
Well, we'll say it's going to be an interactive exercise where you can make decisions. Lily was talking about, in order to make informed decisions, you need that kind of background. So, you will be doing an exercise where you spend the city's money on priorities that you want to spend on, and you'll see what the outcome of that will be, or what the trade-offs are.
And much like Examine Urbana, where we need you to know kind of the complications with some of the issues and how some things don't get solved overnight, there's complications with this next interactive things. You'll see what your budget is, and you'll see everything is really awesome, and it's really cool, and everybody would like to do all the things. But you have what your resources are, and that's probably one of the biggest decisions that the city sees, and its biggest constraint is just resources.
And in the exercise, your income is stagnant. And we based it on the city's actual income, revenue sources. And so you have those, but they stay stagnant. But your expenses that we give you, the options we give you, are 3 times what the income is. So you have to make decisions on where you're
I
going to
feel
spend
like
your
we've
money.
teased enough here.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
Let's leave people wanting, right?
Yeah. Well, hopefully they will want that, yeah.
Truth.
Yeah,
Yes.
sounds good. Well, and is there a timeline for this? Is this like the
We're
summer
looking at
or-
probably June.
Okay.
We've got a couple of them that we're setting the in-person meetings for, so we should have some dates here soon on that.
Sounds good.
So we should really push this on people to view this in the next, really, month and a half.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
All right. Any last thoughts, comments, questions? Thanks again. This is a great presentation, amazing website. Really appreciate the effort.
Oh, boy.
Thank you.
So do we need to do anything procedurally besides adjourn, or do we need to close the study session?
Yes, let's close the study session.
Okay. Can I get a motion to exit our study session?
I move.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor of exiting the study session, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes. We are out of our study session and we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.